Okay. Wow, it's so quiet.
I know.
Thanks so much for coming, everyone. It's great to see so many faces in the room to kick off Lunar New Year. I just wanted to give a quick intro to Emily and the Artist Residency, as well as the W.O.W project. So the W.O.W project has been going on now for 1.5 years, and it's a community initiative housed out of the shop that you're in right now, which is the oldest store in Chinatown. It's 93 years old this year, and has been in my family for 5 generations. The W.O.W project is working to reclaim ownership over Chinatown's future through arts and culture, as well as activism. So the residency is one of the programs that we started in our first year, and we're supporting emerging Asian American artists who are passionate about engaging the community and creating the content for their final window display, which is actually coming up for Emily on February 13th, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, without further ado, I'll have Emily introduce herself, introduce the project, and also introduce why you're all here tonight. So thank you so much. I forgot to introduce myself. And I'm the founder and director of the W.O.W project. So thank you so much.
Thank you, May. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for, this is like the most on-time audience I've been a part of in a while. As a perpetually late person, I was on time today. So my name, as May said, is Emily Mah, and I'm the artist in residence who is facilitating a community-engaged project. We had workshops from October until very recently in January, several every month, and anybody was invited to come and learn how to make paper cuts, learn how to make shadow puppets out of paper. It's originally out of donkey hide, which we don't have access to as much, but we use black cardstock, and everyone made their own puppets and devised their own plays. And the central question that this project was thinking about is, how do you sweep away evil? So I want to talk a little bit about why this is a central question, and why sweeping is a central action that we've been trying to evoke. So Lunar New Year, or Spring Festival, as it's often called in mainland China, Lunar New Year is something that's celebrated by lots of different cultures and places. There happen to be a lot of Chinese folks in the U.S. and in New York or San Francisco, for instance, and so we tend to kind of overwhelm what this event is. But it's got different names and lots of places celebrate it. So we're talking specifically about how Chinese cultures and Chinese diaspora celebrate the new year, the lunar solar new year. And this isn't necessarily something I really knew when I was growing up in San Francisco, but my family would clean our house right before Chinese New Year, and we made sure to keep it clean. I wasn't really sure why. I just thought it was like a good time at the beginning of the year to like throw out all your stuff, right? Or some of it, like we hoard too. But sweeping, as I found out later on, actually pretty recently, which is I think something that lots of diaspora experience, right? Like we just found out something, I was like, oh, this is why we are the way we are. Or this is this important thing that I finally learned to put into words or articulate to myself. But Chinese folks sweep their homes, their businesses, their spaces before the new year to sweep away the bad luck, to sweep away the evil spirits of the past year or of other times, and to open up space for regeneration, open up space for the new luck to come in. So you don't sweep after the new year. You also are careful not to cut your hair after Chinese New Year has passed, because you're cutting away all your new good luck. So this is why our central question is, what do you do to sweep away evil? So what we're going to do today is we have 5 incredible panelists who've joined us of varying heights behind the counter at the moment. But I'm going to share with you who they are by reading quick bios. And then what our discussion, how it'll be formatted is I have 3 to 4 questions depending on how long it takes us. But I'm going to ask the question, everyone's going to answer for a couple minutes. And then we'll move on to the next question, and then we'll save as much time as we can in the end for questions and discussion with everyone here. Okay? All right, so I want to share with you who's here. On the far end is Fay Bonas. Fay was born in Trinidad and Tobago in the 70s. She works predominantly in acrylic painting and recycled paper. Fay studied art at BMCC and is a teaching artist for the Laundromat Project. She's currently working on ways to upcycle used paper to create art. She was part of a community project in the South Bronx that created scarecrows and considered what threatens our communities and what inspires us about them. I'm going to quickly name the other folks involved in the Scarecrow Project, because they also could be speaking on this too, and actually one of them is here. Dion Gonzalez, Isaiah Brockenbaugh, London Hugh, Janaya Owens, Lahana Reamer, Hugo Moreno, Rosa Muniz, Elizabeth Rossi, TJ Mohammed, Emilio Pope, Alicia Pace, Nikome Anderson, Stephanie Alvarado, Alicia Grullon, me, Cheryl Durant, and Bruce Zines. And Melanie Wang. I'm going a little bit out of order. Melanie Wang is one of the Chinatown Tenants Union organizers at CAAAV, which organizes Asian communities and is based in Chinatown on Hester Street. The Chinatown Tenants Union is an organization of rent-stabilized tenants in Chinatown fighting together for safe, affordable housing for our immigrant community. I also want to introduce with Melanie Mimi Ya. Where's Mimi? Mimi's over there. Mimi's a tenant leader with Chinatown Tenants Union and is also might be adding a little bit to the conversation. Muriel Miguel, right there. Muriel is the founder and artistic director of Spiderwoman Theater. She's a director, choreographer, writer, and educator and has worked extensively in performance in both the U.S. and Canada for over 40 years. She's received a 2016 Guggenheim Fellowship, awarded an honorary doctorate of fine arts from Miami University, and is a member of the National Theater Conference. And Jes Tom, right over here. Jes, they, them, is an actor and queer and weird queer stand-up comic. Jes has shared stages with Aquafina, Kate Bornstein, Aparna Nancherla, and Rosie O'Donnell. Their work has been featured on BuzzFeed, Time Out New York, Go Magazine, and Them.us. Follow Jes on Twitter at Jes Tom and on Instagram at Jes the Kid. And lastly, we have Donna Mah next to me. Donna's a New York State licensed acupuncturist with a practice in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine located in Union Square. As a fourth-generation Chinese American raised in Chinatown, she's long explored the intersection of culture and her roots in the formation of her identity through food and most recently in the medicine. She received her BA from Tufts University in Child Study, International Relations, and East Asian Studies. Donna received her master's and is a doctorate candidate in acupuncture and Chinese medicine from the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. In between, she's had a 17-year career on Wall Street, focused community service work through development and fundraising at Transfiguration Church and School across the street, and studied pastry arts at the French Culinary Institute. These days, she's focused more exclusively teaching the foundational principles of Chinese medicine, working with the curatorial team at the Museum of Chinese in America on an exhibit about Chinese medicine, which will open in April of this year, and seeing patients in her practice called Bridge Acupuncture. Maybe we can give a quick round of applause for the panelists before we start. All right. So folks who are just coming in, we just started, and I was introducing the people on the panel. We're going to have a couple rounds of questions that each of the panelists will answer, and then we'll try to have as much time as possible at the end for larger audience discussion and questions. Okay. So we're here in W.O.W in this context of a small business that's been here on Mott Street for 5 generations. So I feel like we're very deeply in the context of space and legacy. Can you, as a way of introducing yourself and your work and your practice, tell us a little bit about what legacies of sweeping away evil you come from? Actually, I'm going to wait a second and repeat the question. So we're here in a small business that's been on Mott Street for 5 generations. So whenever I'm here in this space, I feel very strongly that there's a legacy that's known to me, and that's very lucky because not all legacies are known to us. So I'm curious, as a way of introducing yourself, could you talk a little bit about what legacies of sweeping away evil you come from? Does anyone want to start? Can we start with you, Donna?
Okay. Sorry, my bio was so long, and I'm going to speak briefly. Just sitting and thinking about it, even the word evil, and I have this dilemma with this long kind of history being, 4 generations here. I'm not fluent in Chinese, right? So a lot of what I've accessed over time is really through English source texts, and I realize the complexity of it, especially then going back and studying the medicine, that there's some things that are sometimes lost in translation, right? And some things gained. So we always have to kind of go back and look a little deeper. And so this concept of evil, when I first heard of it, had a connotation of something very scary, very much aligned to this Scarecrow project, right? Something very like frightening, and we needed to sort of like get it out, and I think that comes from a lot of the culture, particularly from the Southern Chinese aspect and of women, learning from women, and being very fear-based of superstition. And if you didn't do this, then bad things were going to happen, so there was a sort of energy that kind of, just made it about it being very guarded and frightened. But in fact, over time, we learn and we align it to every custom of starting anew, right? Starting a new year and sort of getting rid of what we don't really need anymore. This whole active respiration, like even in the physical body of taking in oxygen and eliminating carbon dioxide, is sort of this aspect of, taking in what serves us and letting go of what no longer does. And so I've kind of come around to sort of a gentler thought and understanding of it setting a rhythm, into the start of new things, a new day, a new year.
Mm-hmm. And when we've talked before, I know you mentioned that the superstition and things that seem fear-based are also informed by the fact that lots of places in China are agricultural villages, and men were often in the U.S. or Cuba working, and there was Japanese imperialism and potential invaders. So that's, right, some of the context for fear.
Right, yeah, because when I think about how my grandmother was raised and the stories that she would tell and sort of the energy that was behind, the way that she understood and did things, not always, being an American kid, you say, why? And she never really had a reason, couldn't really explain it. It's just what we do. It's what she was taught. And there's a lot of mystery, and then and if you don't do it, that's what happens. Her father was away and he was here, working in the U.S. and and then her husband was away, and so there were these collectives and support systems of women that, agriculturally based. If the electricity goes out, and we experienced this here in New York with Sandy, right? I suddenly felt like I understood a little bit what it was like to be in the 19th century, right? I mean, living down here we were in the dark. Mm-hmm. We went to bed I think I fell asleep by 7 o'clock every night because the sun was down and it was really dark by then, and I didn't know what else to do. And you sort of really kind of appreciated that there's a whole other rhythm that life was set to in the absence of our, industrial electrical age. And so the rhythm of the way things worked at that time had to be negotiated in a different way. And some of it has carried over, and thankfully we have some good memory of it. But to sort of pull it apart and see all of these things in context is, I think, really the most enriching part of our cultural experience.
The legacy that Kelly Street and the Bronx would like to portray would be, because the South Bronx is the poorest congressional district in the nation. Mm-hmm. Over 250,000 people are under the poverty line. So we on Kelly Street try to incorporate projects with the Laundromat Project, with Banana Kelly, with Kelly Street the Block Association. And we try to do projects like the Scarecrow Project that incorporates our neighbors to come out and do stuff and grow food in the garden, get your hands dirty, incorporate art, express yourself about how the environment feels. And we try to help as much as possible. We, maybe about a month ago, one of the kids came out with no coat on. And we were trying to think about what are ways we could help him without him feeling sort of depressed or ashamed. So we're in the process of making a website where we could exchange coats or whatever items people doesn't want without people knowing, just come in and do stuff like that. So we're really trying to build a new legacy because of all the stuff that's going on right now. So that's one of the things we do.
Anyone can go next.
Oh, it's me, I guess.
I guess
Thanks
Thanks.
for looking at me.
You want to take the first step?
I'm Muriel Miguel. I am Native American. We've been here a very long time, too. I'm Kuna Rappahannock. The Kunas are from off the coast of Panama. They have a sovereignty called Kuna Yala. And the Rappahannocks are from Virginia, the Powhatan Nation, and they also, they've been here a long time also. My mother and father met in Brooklyn. They married in Brooklyn. And I was born in Brooklyn. So I'm truly a city Indian. And proud of it, I'm not from a reservation. I am, I was born and bred and went to school here. It's strange, when you said evil, and I was trying to think of evil, and when I thought of evil, I came up with some stupid things in my head, and rather trivial, I could,
Images.
Abstract.
and so I started to think about what is evil? Sitting in my neighborhood and all the gentrification going around, is that evil? Kids being stolen and bought, and the trafficking of women, is that evil or is it greed? Is all of it greed? And I kept on thinking like this, and then I started to think, well, how I was taught that there are spirits. We have spirits. And a lot of times you feel things, right? You feel things from people. Is that evil? Or is that you feeling things? So I was thinking about that, how and what is it that makes that little thing ring in your head that detects what? Evil? I don't know if that's evil. And then I started to think about the things that have happened to me. And one of the things I remember was I was at a Sundance. I was dancing, and the last night, one of the men was beating his girlfriend. And I remember lying in the tent. This was a very well-known, activist leader beating up a woman. And I was lying there thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And finally, a bunch of us, just activated right away. We jumped up and we went outside, and he was dragging her to the water and cursing us and telling us to get away. And I remember feeling really helpless, what do I do here? If I attack him or if I talk to him, he's going to hurt her more. Get his family. So we got his family. And again, he was feeling embarrassed, so we had to let this man go. So the next day, I went to the woman and I said, I think we should leave, I don't care if it was a Sundance. We have to leave. And so we got to her car and we left. But it stayed with me. It stayed with me a very long time, this feeling of being helpless and not being able to do something about this. So when I started when I started Spiderwoman, part of the thing was looking at anger and rage. Now, is that evil? I don't know. Again, and really inspecting it and getting women together and talking about rage and being able to destroy destroy a room because you get so angry. You know, is that evil, or is it just rage? So I, you know, with all of that, I started a piece, a theater piece with Spiderwoman called Women in Violence, and it was talked about all of the stories of rapes and what happens when these things happen to you, and real stories about it. And I realized, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, that, well, that was my way of sweeping away. But we wouldn't call it that because we use sage and we use sweetgrass, and sage is put, you know, we pray with it and we put it on us, and the same as sweetgrass. So we don't sweep away, but we remember this way. This is the way that we remember. And I realized that that was the first thing I did that was a way of looking at the evil, looking at the abuse, was with this one piece called Women in Violence. I looked at it again now, 40 years later, because the theater group is over 42 years old. And I realized that this is still happening. Women are still being beaten. Women are still being murdered, being disappearing. So now what do we do now? You know, I don't know if this is evil, but it has my anger behind it, because it seems like it's easier in the mainstream that there's no low tolerance, you know, men get sent off and, you know, but it's still happening where I am, you know, all these women are still disappearing, they're still dying, so I have great anger there, great rage. Is that evil? I don't know.
Do you want to follow that, or should I? I'll go. Okay.
You don't have to talk.
Oh, I cannot talk. That's an option up here. Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie, in case you've forgotten names from when Emily introduced us. I am a tenant organizer at the Chinatown Tenants Union, which is a program of CAAAV organizing Asian communities. And there are a number of folks in this room who are really close to both Chinatown Tenants Union and CAAAV. I don't know if folks want to self-identify, but I'm like, I see you out there. And especially Mimi, who's here with me tonight to represent Chinatown Tenants Union. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I moved to New York, just a simple one. So
Yeah.
I moved to New York since 2013, and then we got evicted from the landlord 2014. So since then I joined CAAAV. Yeah. And my name is Mimi. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah. And I just say that to say that, like, I feel like I'm kind of here tonight to represent the work we do, the community organizing work we do around housing, and kind of talk about that as a form of sweeping away evil, but I'm not the only person in this room right now who can talk about it. And there are folks here who can talk about it from very personal experience. But kind of just, you know, for those who might not be familiar, thinking about like our larger background and the idea of legacy, I think like CAAAV and the Chinatown Tenants Union and organizing in general feels really similar to what Fay was describing kind of in the Bronx, what you were describing with theater, like practices of storytelling, practices of community, bringing folks together, kind of, we do all that in our organization and we call it organizing, right? And that's kind of how we sweep away evil. CAAAV got started in the 1980s by a group of Asian American, Asian immigrant identified women who were in New York and kind of really wanted to mobilize the identity politics emerging in that time, and also stand in solidarity with other communities of color around the shared violence that our communities were experiencing, particularly after the murder of Vincent Chin in 1982, and also after kind of waves of hate crime violence, like racial violence and police violence in New York in the early 80s, right? So our organization started in 86, first around a lot of solidarity work with Black and Brown communities and families of victims of police violence and racial violence, and then also within the Asian American community itself. So our organizing work has really deep cross-cultural, like multi-ethnic and cross-racial lines. We come from that legacy. And then specifically around the Chinatown Tenants Union and housing, our housing organizing got started in the early 2000s in this neighborhood, kind of as a result of working with folks in the community around other issues, worker issues, and particularly street vendors and other groups, taxi drivers we organized for a while, but seeing that working class immigrant folks from many different backgrounds faced similar challenges around housing and finding stable housing, and also the types of violences they endured at the hands of landlords without consciences is basically what I'll say to try and put that nicely, right? A lot of folks in rent stabilized housing in the neighborhood, especially with increasing gentrification pressures, face harassment, face frivolous lawsuits and evictions, and then on top of really basic repair issues like heat and hot water and quality of life issues, right? So the kind of larger project of the Chinatown Tenants Union is to bring folks who are facing housing problems together in community. We have monthly meetings, we help form building associations, and to stand together to find strategies, whether they be legal, whether they be about protest and social pressure, whether they be about simply just writing their landlord and having a lot of signatures on that letter, mobilizing the power that we have in community to get the material changes folks really need in their lives, right? So when I think of kind of sweeping in the context of our work, it's really about like tidying up the home, protecting the home, taking the space that is supposed to be safe and nurturing and warm for each of us, and for so many people is not, and finding ways that we as a community can really build the safety that we need.
I'm Jes. I'm a stand-up comic. I'm also fourth-ish, fifth-ish generation American. So when it comes to a legacy of sweeping away evil, I'm very lucky to to be able to have access to a lot of family history that sometimes folks don't get to have. So I'm half Japanese and half Chinese, 5th gen on the Japanese side. So I've been thinking a lot, particularly lately. I mean, I've always been thinking about it, but particularly lately, about just the legacy of being Japanese American, and 5th generation Japanese American, and so what that means, like, for the legacy of my family. I also come from, specifically on the Japanese side, a very kind of rich history of just like significant historical figures that I feel like in their own ways have tried, like whether or not I would necessarily agree with the ways that they've tried to do it, of sweeping away evil. It's interesting. I grew up knowing a lot about my maternal grandfather, who died a long time before I was born, who was like a big deal Japanese American activist, and his like big project was trying to get the United States government to acknowledge and apologize for World War II internment camp. And so that's like, you know, that's a pretty like feel-good activist story that like we can all get behind. And I was like, yeah, like, you know, that's who I come from. That's where I come from. I found out more recently that my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, was actually president of the Japanese American Citizens League during World War II. And so, which means that he was a large part of the driving force to get Japanese American men drafted in the American military to prove that they were American. And so, okay, now it's like a little complicated, you know, like that actually sounds like not so good to me. Like that sounds like, you know, that sounds like a side of politics that like I, you know, myself on this day would not have been on. And so I've been trying to think about, you know, the ways that, just like the reasons for that, or the ways that like, the reasons why he or my family or he and the people who agreed with him, which were few and far between, it was very unpopular in the community, very, very unpopular. And it actually like turned like the whole Japanese American community that he was a part of against him. And I think justifiably so. But like why, you know, why it would be that somebody might think that that was the right choice to make for their family or for their people. Like I don't think it was the right choice. I myself don't think so, but like why, what was, you know, why is it that for somebody that might be their sweeping away evil type thing? And also just thinking about, you know, so my grandfather, who was the rah-rah activist who we liked, and who it's easy for me to kind of lionize because he died a long time before I was born, so I didn't know him, so it's really easy for me to be like, oh yeah, like, he was amazing, he stood for all this great stuff. I also hear he wasn't a very nice guy, you know, and that he, like, wasn't necessarily a nice dad or a nice husband to the people, the women who are in my life, who still continue to be in my life to this day. And then so how is it, too, that the women in my family have, like, carried on this legacy of, like, of you know, continuing on and continuing, I don't know, I need a thesaurus, continuing to carry on the family, like, after this, like, patriarch, this, like, figurehead, this, like, kind of famous guy was gone for years and years and years afterwards. And then what does it mean for me now to be a person who is a relatively young person, who's a millennial, who has kind of arrived at this point in my family's legacy where I'm kind of like the generation that gets to benefit from the American dream, quote unquote. Big quotes.
Yes.
But where I'm the generation that gets to really actually have the more sort of comfortable life than some of the generations that came before me. Because I do actually think that, like, if let's say the American dream is real and it's capitalistic, like comfort, I think it takes many, many generations to get there. But for a lot of folks, particularly particularly Asian Americans whose families haven't been in this country for that long, that story doesn't get talked about quite as much. So what does it mean for me to be like the kid who got to be an artist, who gets to be a stand-up comic in the year 2018, with everything that's happening right now, but also everything that's been happening for the past 500 years, for the past 1,000 years, for me to be arriving at this point with my jokes. What is that? Yeah, what does that mean for me to have come from that legacy, and then be here where I am now? Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, everyone. Could you each of you share a ritual, a memory, an imaginary practice you already have that you use to sweep away evil in your life? This could be daily life, this could be an event. Maybe we can start with Fay and work our way down this time.
Okay, I personally wake up and I have to connect with God. That's my way of sweeping away evil for the day. Meditation, and then a brisk walk to the bus stop to take my son. that helps to clear the air. And some of the traditions of Trinidad and Tobago as the new year comes, which is similar to what Emily mentioned, is cleaning out everything. Everything must be freshly painted, old furniture. Sometimes, if you could afford it, get new furniture. You should wear brightly colored red to signify goodness and happiness is going to come. Some of the other things were, we have this thing called the CAAAV broom. It's made from the coconut branches. We leave it in the corner and we sweep away evil using that broom. So we sweep, we mop, and it's similar to traditions of everywhere, because I was asking this question earlier, and the Americans also had similar traditions of cleaning the house and stuff on New Year's.
I can't think of anything like that.
You mentioned some
It
already.
seems like we're the opposite. You know what I mean? Many of things in my family are really old that we have kept. And it was important to keep. I know some nations, we have bundles. And bundles are, in that bundle is all your sacred things, all the things that you keep. And you keep them. I know families that have bundles that go on for centuries, that they've had their, so we go on, from way, way, way back, but we keep it. And some of it is in the earth and the trees, in the sand surrounding things. It's the landmarks that are around, and I was thinking that one time I remember I was in Lethbridge in Canada on it was the Blackfoot, and one of the teachers came up to me and said, I've just been down to the certain place on the land. I think it was Broken Dog or Broken Leg. And we all have names like that. A lot of us have names like that. And he said he was talking about how it looked, and he would like to put this into a dance that we were working on. Of what does this mean? How does that combine in our bodies? And the whole dance that we did was part of that, was part of this broken leg. I think it was broken leg. So in the land that's around, and even where I live now, and my family's been there 100 years in this place in Brooklyn, all those things, like the placenta, my placenta is buried under a tree on Douglas Street in Brooklyn, you know. I know where it is. I mean, that's the thing, I know where it is. So for me, it's not sweeping away. We have to remember. We have to remember everything. We have to remember the things that happened to us. We have to remember what happened to all the people that came before us. That's really, really important. So we never sweep away. We always keep. That'll explain a lot.
I'm so relieved neither of you took my answer. Because it's very cliche, I think, which is food. Cooking, feeding other people, pouring tea, drinking together, sitting around a table with other people. I think it's kind of the sweeping away. I'm thinking about like fortifying the safe place, you know, building home, building community. And I think one thing that is definitely just like a huge focal point of my life, personally and culturally, but then also I think a focal point of the organizing we do within the Chinatown Tenants Union, and practices of door knocking and meeting with folks and everything is just shared food, spending time with one another, and sitting around a table. I love it when folks bring food to meetings that they have cooked in their own homes. I remember once, it must have been around the holiday, we had like a large monthly meeting in our office, and there were probably like 30 something people, and somebody had made and brought in like, there had to have been like 50 zongzi. I don't know what they're called in English. Does anyone know?
Zongzi.
There's no, because like they're usually translated as like glutinous rice dumpling.
Call them Chinese tamales.
Yeah.
So you have to have like two derivations.
Zongzi, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, is like the sticky rice, sometimes with meat or with like meat in a savory version, or like red bean or peanuts in a sweet version, wrapped up in leaves and steamed, right? And there is like a particular holiday for which you make a lot of these, and someone else will have to talk about that because I'm not really up to date on my festivals. But it was around that time, and somebody had made like an unfathomable amount of these, very small ones, and then brought them to our monthly meeting, and then just everybody in the whole room. Wow. There was also, we had a summer event once where we just ate massive amounts of watermelon, but we still had watermelon left over, so like in October, I was trying to convince people to chop up and eat this watermelon. They were like, wasn't that from a while ago? It was still good though. I think, I think growing up as a kid, my father was very ritualistic about, like, we'd have dinner, and I don't know if other families do this, but we'd have dinner, and then after dinner, it was always, you know, we take a little break, and then we come back, and he'd peel an apple and put on a pot of green tea. Very ritualistic. And I think of that, those kinds of little rituals, those kinds of practices around food and the sharing of food is, you know, it's one of the most universal ways we show other folks that we care about them. And giving and receiving care from other people is I think really how we build community.
I would say for me, it's obviously my unshakable sense of humor. I did, after, I say this very intentionally as an acknowledgement of my own various privileges, that after the election last year, I started to be more intentional about the kind of work that I do, and that yes, it did take me as long as until the election last year. I remember in the first couple of months from like November to like the inauguration in January, I had the good fortune of getting to do a lot of shows that I call like community shows, so like less like stand-up comedy in a bar or in a club, but like shows at Asian American Writers Workshop, or doing queer events or things like that, where there like probably wasn't going to be a lot of stand-up comedy happening other than me, and where maybe stand-up comedy usually didn't go. And I tried at that time to start to be a lot more intentional about being able to like make comedy and bring humor to communities that I'm a part of, and particularly marginalized communities or people who were feeling hit really hard by what was going on. And I think also like particularly to Asian American communities, because I don't think that, like, I feel like particularly as like a queer trans Asian American, I move through a lot of art and performance spaces that are like really kind of heavy, or like we know how to talk about trauma a lot. We know how to cry. We know how to make each other cry. We don't really know how to laugh necessarily. We don't know how to make each other laugh. We don't know how to laugh together, or we don't do it a lot. Not that we don't know how to, but we don't get to do it a lot. And I just think that that's so important, and I think it's so important for morale for all of us, to be able, to get up in the morning or in the afternoon or whenever it is that you get up, and be able to, face the day or the evening or whatever time it is, with, in a world that is like very often a very difficult and violent and traumatic world to be in, to be able and like to be able to laugh about stuff. And I don't even mean in a way that like glosses over things or like doesn't look at things, but is like, here's like my trauma, like let's laugh at it, like not really, but like let's laugh in its face, like let's like what's like funny about like how horrible this thing is, not and I only mean like speaking about my own experiences. Like obviously I'm not like laughing at anybody else's stuff. But yeah, so I've just been thinking a lot more about how I can make comedy that's for marginalized people and that like we can laugh at. 'Cause in the beginning, I really had like strongly like only like mainstream success intentions, which like I do still have, but a lot of that involved not being very truthful about who I was, not really giving my own point of view, like even in some ways like intentionally twisting things I believed or who I was so that people had an easier time seeing me or an easier time understanding me. And I was like, okay, like let me play to, the white cis heterosexual audience, because these are the people, who are gonna have to, who I'm gonna have to make laugh, like if I intend to have any success like in this kind of work. And so now I'm working more on how I can do comedy that's more impactful to people who are more like me, but also like is something that everybody can laugh at, and that maybe somebody learns something that, or maybe somebody hears something that they've never heard before. Maybe they've never thought about this thing this kind of way. Yeah, how can we laugh in the face of like everything that's going on right now, and that has been going on forever, and that is how I would say that I am trying to sweep away some evil.
What was the question again? I'm just kidding.
What do you
No,
do?
I was so captivating. I just get lost in and sort of sitting here like thinking about how this all came down the line, right? There's this sort of letting go and cleaning, and then the holding on and remembering, and then sort of this community activism and the importance of sort of taking a stand, and then you talking about laughter, about this sort of letting go, right? So we just sort of have this kind of, I don't know, just very organic, back to this, I'm sort of must be seeing what I want to see about this respiration thing, right? And you all touch on some of the things that I think ritual, and I'm not a very good ritualer because I'm not terribly consistent, but I was thinking about the kinds of things that I make a point to bring into my day, my week, and where I check myself in. And one of the things is the cooking, as you were describing, and that does bring me back, and it is sometimes, if I have a deadline or I've got to do some writing or I'm sort of stuck on something, there's 2 words written on a page or on my computer, and there's like 3 pots, different kinds of soup that are on the stove. It's sort of where, and things can actually move because I can chop vegetables, I can be productive in some other part that grounds me and sort of takes me out of my head of whatever is blocking my writing process. But people can tell that when I'm prolifically cooking, I'm stuck someplace else. So there's this kind of and it speaks to this kind of this necessity of having movement, right? Why laughter is so important, and having that release, because if we are always just kind of heavy and weighed down, we're heavy and weighed down, and how do we move forward and evolve? And that's really, I think, what this whole concept of sweeping away evil is. It's one half of, as you described in your introduction, it's one half of the story. It is to prepare for blessings. It is to prepare for abundance, right? It's the first part, right? And so when you go back and study Chinese medicine, you look more deeply in the culture, you go back to these sort of primordial concepts of yin-yang, and they get so stereotypically brought in, but it really is at the foundation of everything, our day and our night, our sleeping and our waking, our health and our recovery and disease and illness. And in the medicine, we talk about evil and pathogens that come from the outside, because there was some of the medical theories that evolved over time, were really rooted, and you'll all recognize this, in the agriculture, the science of agriculture, which was the highest form of technology. And we all who grew up around this medicine, heard concepts of damp and cold and heat, and in ways that we didn't see it, right? And said, why is my grandmother talking about damp evil or hot air and lychees or something? And but you go back and you realize that, there was a wisdom in terms of understanding the effect of these things in excess, or in insufficiency on the workings of the body, right? The body was this big landscape of an agricultural field, right? Going back to, Fay and the work that you're doing with gardening, and, being closer to the earth and realizing how you have to weed out, right? You literally have to weed, and how you have to prepare the ground. That is what keeps away evil. That is what allows things to grow and proliferate and literally cultivate, right? This idea of the body, and you talked about the spirit, we are, the ancients, and we a little far away from it again, never separated mind, body, and spirit, right? I mean, it's gotten so cliche. I always hate using it, but I have to always come back to it. It was all one. It was who identified who we were. And there are spirits, the ones that can strengthen us and sustain and make us strong, and the ones that are going to try to wreak a little havoc, right? And so some of the concepts of us being strong and protecting our body and our home, is creating this sort of safety, lends us to be a little more impervious, to invasion and evil. And so self-care and all of this in terms of cleaning and what do we hold on to and what do we let go of, and eating well and having community and support and laughing in the face of darkness, is all really important. And things that I do to sort of infiltrate that, lighting a candle at the end of the day, right? Sort of pausing as I'm walking down the street to look up and see the sky. And wow, that's a really interesting color of blue, or like, oh, the moon's, just making sure that we pause, because we do get so busy and so active, either in our activism or in our work or our survival. But there's this whole world, you know, right?
Thank you, everyone. I wonder if, not everyone needs to answer this, but I wonder if you can give everyone in the room a call to action. So what's something that folks in this room can do to sustain something that needs sustaining, and to build home and safety in 2018? Can we start with you, Donna?
Oh,
I'm sorry, in 28 days, did you say?
In 2018.
Now,
It's not that's the menstrual cycle. Like
that's the lunar.
Come on,
some
come
people's
on.
big or small.
Big or small.
Yeah.
You know, I think about this concept of cultivate and self-cultivation, and every culture talks about this. And I was just doing a lecture thing on Confucius, and it was right there. And then the Renaissance, you know, that this was sort of part of the broad education. You know, I don't know. I just maybe pause and sort of see what aspirations do we have? Do you have? Do you hold for yourself, your personal self, and really, you know, deliberately tend to that, right? Deliberately think of how to cultivate that. One of my students asked me, "What do you mean? You want me to have a plant?" And I said, at first I was like, "No," but I was like, "Yes, you know, sure, why not?" Because you know, I kill plants routinely, you know, and I'm getting a little better about it, but, you know, you having a plant will make you sort of have a set rhythm of the day. Do you need water? Oh, God, I forgot about you. Leaves are dropping off. And, you know, we're just so far away from this, right? Because, like, it's crazy. So plants are great, right? But then even just self-care, like this whole sweeping away evil, we by being strong of spirit and body and mind, you know, I think everybody knows what that is for them. You know, everyone knows what, you know, that list of things that you have, you know, write 3 things down, you know, and just start hitting it, you know. There's a lot, right? Lots of trauma, lots of pain, lots of injustice, but there's also a lot of beauty, incredible kindness, great opportunity, and I think we have to tend to all sides of it. Right, because this is that's who we are supposed to be.
I got one going off of that. Stop hate reading people's social media.
Yeah, definitely.
I say this to you all because it's something I have to say to myself every day. Stop it. No, but really though, I say again, just from my own experience, at the end of last year, I started to get like really, really obsessed with like just like really looking at the social media of people I didn't like, or even worse, people I felt myself to be in professional competition with, and it just made me feel really bad. And you can't really, all the time that you spend and all the mental energy that you spend doing stuff like that means that you're not spending it on your 3 things that you wrote down because Donna told you to, or in cultivating becoming your best self, or going towards your goals, or making yourself better, your space better. I have a friend who's been talking a lot about that the Japanese organization lady.
Marie
Yes,
Kondo. Yeah.
yes.
It's
her.
awesome. It's actually a great,
Spoiler, I haven't read her book.
You can listen to it on audiobooks. It's even better.
But, KonMari, your newsfeed. Bring it down to just things that bring you joy. Just cute animal videos or whatever it is. Don't look at people you don't like. Focus on the things that are good for you and your people.
Donna, I actually wrote down one.
Oh, cool.
And it's to save your soul, your essence of who you are, your energy and your creativity. So I would like to say that, and working with other artists on the Laundromat Project, and working on the Scarecrow, and gardening, and giving away 1,000 pounds of food last year for free. Things like that you would like to say.
Yeah.
It's me again. I'm being polite and letting you go first. It's all right, I'm good. When all this was going on, I was thinking a long time ago, I was on a reservation and this medicine woman said to me, you're a medicine woman. And now what do you do with that? You know, you buy vitamins? I don't know. And I was like, I walked around with this whole thing like, she says I'm a medicine woman. She says I'm a medicine woman. What do I do? What do I do? And, and so I was talking about it in a circle one day, you know, because I was thinking of looking into Chinese medicine, Japanese medicine, you know. And someone said to me, well, it's your theater. Your theater is your medicine. You know, why didn't I think of that? I mean, that's dumb of me. But there I was thinking about it. Well, yes, this is what I do. And so that's, you know, I go around to different places and work with Native kids and you know, help people with their shows and so on, dramaturg things. And now I'm on a crusade. This is not, I don't think this is the 2018, this is probably 2020. In New York City, especially, there are many Native people. There's like 20,000, you know, people that live in New York City, the greater New York area. And how come we don't have a higher profile? You know? Do you see, you know, like, oh, maybe I'm the first Native person you've ever met, right? Or the second or the third, but not that many. And I say to myself, why is that? Why does that happen to us? There are tribes on Long Island, there are tribes, you know, upstate New York. So why does that happen? So I've been asking this question a lot, and one of the things that I decided that I want a culture center. I want a culture center here in New York City. I want to try to figure out, how do I get a culture center? At the moment, I want it with all, and there are at least 5 Native theater groups in New York City. Have you heard about them? No, you haven't. And when we put in for grants, they say, oh my God, there's 5, you know, they're going to have to fight for the money. Well, they don't say that about all the white people, you know, as for grants. They act like we're a glut on the market. So what I'm doing now is going around and talking to various theater groups, Native theater groups, and asking them, like, not what do you want, but what are you thinking? And my idea of talking to a lot of people, different people, and seeing, it gets me, you know, when someone says that they bought a building for $1. You know, like, I know you need money besides that, but still, they were given the opportunity to get it for $1. So that is what, you know, I'm really, you know, day after day I go to and talk to people just about this now, of giving Native people a higher, you know, a higher profile. We deserve it. We should be, you know. So that's what I'm thinking. Go ahead.
Okay. 2 things. First of all, I don't know how many folks in the room are, like, you know, consider themselves from Chinatown or live around here, work around here, who might be aware of what's happening over at 85 Bowery. Has anyone heard of this? A little bit. So it's been a little bit in the news, and I think local elected officials have been talking about it too. But there's a building at 85 Bowery Street, where the tenants have been in a long time battle with their landlord over conditions in the building and also their status, whether or not they're rent stabilized tenants. The Chinese Staff and Workers Association, which has a long history of organizing in Chinatown, has been working with the folks in the building, and they had, my understanding is that they had an ongoing legal case, and then just when was this? Last week, Thursday?
Yeah.
Last Thursday night, kind of related to the legal case, the Department of Buildings came over to inspect their building, and deemed it, because of stability issues with the stairwell, like unsafe for habitation, and that like very night, like right then, ordered everyone to vacate the building, which is something that the Department of Buildings has power to do if they deem that people are in imminent danger just being even in the building, right? So the result is these folks who have been, coming up against their landlord for years now, fighting for repairs, as a result of negligence around those repairs, are left, having to leave their homes in the middle of the night. So which is a pretty dramatic situation. And I want to say too, it's happened in Chinatown before. It's happened in other neighborhoods before. But this is where it's happening right now. I think, so my understanding is that they have temporary housing right now, and they're working with the Chinese Staff and Workers Association and local elected officials to kind of figure that out. And the city is putting a lot of pressure on the landlord to fix the staircase imminently, and they've given them a 2-week deadline. I don't know how strongly they'll be held to that, but I think just I'm not sure what the organization and the tenants want and need from supporters, because I'm kind of on the periphery of this particular case. But I think just a call to action around that is for folks, especially in the neighborhood, to be aware, to be checking the news for it, to be like contacting local elected officials about it if that's something that you do. Try and keep tabs, because I think the city should know, the elected officials should know, and especially the landlord should know that the larger community has their eyes on this case, 100%, right? This cannot fly under the radar. And, their building is not the only building in Chinatown with these kinds of conditions, right? So I think it should be a larger warning signal to other landlords in the community who are willing to put lives and tenant safety and tenant comfort at risk through their negligence. Then that's kind of the small thing, and then the kind of bigger thing, if I can go on for a little longer, that I've been thinking about a lot is like that case, how much we often find ourselves in the context of organizing and activism, but also in general responding to crisis scenarios and responding to things that aren't right, and critiquing things as opposed to building the things that we want to see. So, which is why I'm really grateful to be here tonight in this space that May and her family have created, that in the space that you've created through the residency, because I think the WOW project in this space is a really great example of like alternatives that we can have in our community, right? And I think about this a lot around housing, obviously. What kind of alternative models of ownership can we have so that profit is not the be all end all, and that people's lives are taken at least into equal measure as how many dollars can be made off of this unit. What kind of alternative ways of thinking about like neighborhoods and community, and who stays where, and whether seniors can age in place, and all these things. What kind of alternatives can we come up with? Alternative systems can we come up with? And how can we practice them now, even in a New York City, and even in a time and place where gentrification feels not only insurmountable, but inevitable, like the natural product of things. Gentrification absolutely is not the natural way of things. It doesn't happen just because that's how things are. It is a man-made creation, and it is the result of practices and policies that our society and our government and businesses put in place, but then also that we participate in it as individuals. So how can we as individuals and also as a larger community come up with alternatives, and what can we build?
All right. Thank you, Fay, Muriel, Melanie, Jes, and Donna. Now we're going to open up the floor to questions. We have time for a couple of questions. Anyone have? I'm just going to wait a little while longer. And if you ask a question, just indicate to us if you're okay with being filmed. If when. Feel free to diverge from this topic a little bit if you want.
I was thinking that I'm Dorothy Kwok from San Francisco, Chinatown. That I'm inspired by the panel that you put together, as well as each aspect of how the answers are to one cultural topic, and how inspirational that is in terms of sharing and also challenging us as an audience. So thank you. I don't have a real question yet. I want to at least get that comment in.
That's
each
good
of
enough.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Melissa, you had a hand?
I had a very simple question. Like, what is the thing that comes to mind to you when you think of what the opposite of evil is? Because I feel like oftentimes we think a lot about evil and fighting that, but like, what do you imagine or to you comes to your mind when you think of that, the opposite of evil?
To me, God, opposite of evil. The creator, the earth, in its original form without the pollution.
I can quickly answer that too. I think about evil in terms of power, which is something that I want to think about as something that's not necessarily evil or bad, but that power is something that can be exerted over. It can be done with, or it can be done for. And I'm trying to move the way I use or embody power to be more with other people.
I don't know that it always has an opposite. I think it's a complex, and the way that we interface with it will vary. You know, sometimes to what Muriel was speaking about, sometimes it's about questioning and holding it in space to really maybe try to get our arms around and understand it and not just be overtaken by it, you know. That's another kind of power, right? It's not just a good, sometimes it's a good evil paradigm, sometimes it's a god. I mean, the whole idea of a devil was a fallen angel, right? It's what other side is this representing, you know, what expression, you know, has so long been repressed or unexpressed that it's coming out kind of sideways and cuckoo, you know. I think it's, and how do we respond, and how do we look at sort of the complexity of it, right?
One time I was,
No, you go.
I was sitting on a dune and hearing the water, the waves come in. It was a real clear night. It was a big moon, and I started to look up at the stars, and that's when you realize, you know, how little you are. When you see all those stars out there, you know, and you're looking up and you say, you're just like, you know, you are a piece of the sand on there. And I think, if I'm thinking about evil, which is hard for me, but I think of that. I think of that I'm just part of a whole here, you know, and to bring, and there's another story like that, and when I was taught to play the pipes, it was said that this is your breath, and your breath goes into the pipe, and when the breath goes out of the pipe and into the universe, and when it's in the universe, it is part of everything, and it comes back again because it rains, and when it rains, it drops into the earth, and into the earth, and then there's things that grow that come out, and the animals eat it, and you eat it, and it goes right back into you again. And I think that's how I think all the time, in that way.
I'm a utopic queer. I admit it. So I do have, big queer dreams of a future, some future, with like a total redistribution of power, of material wealth, of resources, of all of that. I have a big dream like of that. That's not to say I, in my own practice, am necessarily doing the most I could be doing to enact that or to get us there, but it is to say that I have an idealistic utopia dream. That being said, I think a lot about I'm thinking about what Muriel said about how small we are in the universe, and I think about how people with like all of our imbalances of power and material wealth and measuring out resources and measuring things and distributing them unequally are a blip in even just how long like there have been like animals on this planet or whatever. Like we're like the tiniest blip, which means to me that we're probably like, I don't really think human history is gonna like last like billions and billions of years. Like I just don't think that's possible. I don't think we're gonna last millions of years, which to me is a very hopeful thought. And I really mean that in like a total positive. Like I actually I mean like that's good, because to me also, as somebody who at least ideologically is striving towards some sort of utopia, as I think a lot of queer people are, and a lot of just like justice-minded people are, like given that like I don't think it's actually possible to have like a total like utopia world in the real physical world. Let me try to, this like sounds really stoned, but I'm not. I think about it like, you know how on, there's an actual math term for this, when there's a curve that like is getting closer to zero, but it never reaches zero. It just gets closer and closer and closer, but it never actually touches it. The limit does not exist.
That's from Mean Girls.
Thank you.
What's it called?
It's
Hovering. It's called hovering.
That's good. That
Almost. So I think about, I'm like, well, okay, if we were to say, like, okay, humanity is going to stretch on forever, like, into the infinite future, but it's also not possible for a utopia to ever exist. We would just keep we would be trying to get, like, closer and closer and closer, but we would never actually get there. So to me, the idea that probably we're not going to exist into the, like, infinite future means that we can only just get closer and closer, which to me is a very hopeful thought. Even if we never, because I don't think it's possible to try to achieve, and it would be really sad if we were like ultimately trying to achieve this like impossible thing, but to get closer and closer and closer to it, to me is very hopeful.
It's the striving, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I saw one hand there, and then if we make those, and on one hand you're on stack there. Wang, you want to ask, and we'll try to be a little more concise because we're almost at 8:30.
Thanks everyone for sharing. I feel like we covered so much from everyone's different experiences. I wanted to ask what you all make of conversations of gentrification and like the preservation of certain communities of color in conversation with all of this being on native land, and it's kind of a conversation that I haven't seen happen as much, but I know that people are thinking about it, so I wanted to pose that.
Well, it's hard for me, when you think about the last couple of months, another part of Bear Claws, which is a national park, which is being stolen, actually. And other parts of that will be stolen in the next couple of years. And then you think of the pipelines, and the same thing again. But I did talk to people about this. I was saying, well, what do you think, about immigration and more, immigrants coming in, and how do you feel about it? Talking to my people, about that. And I feel that they should be coming, and I don't know why I feel this way. I feel that they should be coming, and especially since it's on our bones and on our spine that this has happened, and then the United States of America says that this is give me your da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, then that's what they should be doing. Otherwise, that Statue of Liberty is a big lie there, huh? That's how I feel.
I'll say on that front, I've been in a lot of spaces in organizing, like housing organizing spaces in New York City, in the context of kind of being part of the Chinatown Tenants Union, and in my experience, it's something that we're not good at talking about, or even thinking about. So kudos to you for bringing up that question, and I think it's an important one because, when you use the word displacement, right? What greater displacement is there?
Yeah.
And I think a crucial part of talking about gentrification and housing in this city is talking about also and learning, kind of having that larger political education, right? When we talk about gentrification in New York City, we're talking about predominantly working class communities of color and how they are impacted, right? Now, why is that? Well, there's a history there behind, like, redlining and the ghettoization of ethnic neighborhoods and so forth, and a long history of who gets to live where and why and in what conditions, both in New York City, and kind of, depending on how big you want to get with it, in a larger scale in the United States, and then kind of globally, right? And that's a really, really complicated, multifaceted conversation about race and class and all sorts of different identity categories and how they interplay together, right? But I think the more we can do, particularly I think in the context of immigrant communities, but also just generally, to work together to understand that history, and talk about it and have it be out there in the open, the more we can name what is happening to us in contemporary times, right? And I mean that as like any kind of us, the more we know about our collective history, the more we understand about who we are right now. So thank you for bringing that up, and I think it's something that we should be better at, of course.
Yeah, the American Indian Community House is finally down to almost a room. I mean, it's gone, really, in lots of ways. The people that reached out to us was from Chinatown. It was Don Chow and Project Reach, who gave the community house a floor to work on.
I was actually just in that space.
Oh, yeah?
Because our office had a pipe burst and flood the place, so it's non-functional, and Project Reach is letting us use their office space.
Yeah.
So we're hanging out.
Yeah, yeah.
On that floor.
It's volunteer people now, but it's really wonderful that he did that, really.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Do you wanna, our last
It's
question?
Jes Tom, thank you. So 2017 has been an unprecedented year, to say the least, and I wonder if any panelists have lessons learned to share and how your activism, how you are changing the ways you do your activism going forward.
Well, personally, on Kelly Street, the collaboration with housing groups and art groups and gardening, we're ever trying to push forward to meet the community needs. So we have activism of the picket landlords who are slumlords. We're trying to grow and sort of meet whatever demands there is in the community, especially on Kelly Street.
Anyone else?
I have some thoughts, but I also feel like I just talked a lot. So if anyone else
Yeah,
wants
me
to go
too. I
before
think I
me,
talked too
Do a quick one. Just do it quickly if you'd like. Go ahead and
2 cents.
yeah,
50.
50 words like your bios.
Oh. It's been a really tiring year. I think, like what I said earlier, just on a personal level, I have a really strong desire to focus on what it is we can build, instead of being so energetically and intellectually focused on what's out there and all the wild stuff that is being said and done, right? Obviously there are a lot of things that we do have to do that are defensive and reactive, right? In terms of protecting our communities, in terms of like, I'm thinking about like all the ICE is arrest the right word? But ICE in New York City now, right? And the detainments, thank you. The detainments happening in the past couple months of outspoken activists, right? There are clearly things that we have to do to be on the defensive in those kinds of situations, but I think also even more so to be trying to build alternatives that look better to our communities and to the folks who voted for the guy in office, right? That look better to everyone, right? So that we can say next time around, let's choose this. For goodness sake, let's choose this. One thing that we've started looking into at CAAAV and CTU is the idea of a community land trust, which is kind of like, in a short version, it's like an alternative land ownership model. It's something that would be very difficult to build in Chinatown for a lot of reasons and would take a lot of time, but we're starting to kind of like do that research and want to, over the course of this year, do a lot of education work with our member base about it to see if folks really feel like this is a viable and a useful tool, right?
What do you call it?
A community land trust. Basically, the idea is that you have a piece of land and the community owns it, not the government, but the community in some sort of organizational form. And then they might take the housing or whatever's built on top and rent it out or give it to like another organization to run as housing or so forth. But the land itself would be in perpetual community ownership and thus would be off the market. And there is one already in New York. It's called the Cooper Square Community Land Trust, and you all should look it up because there's a long history there in the East Village of 50 years of housing organizing that led to the formation of that land trust. And they've succeeded in preserving affordable rents in a small area of the East Village.
This is a very protagonistic answer that I have. But in the past year, I've started to audition for TV, which is something I always wanted to do, and like in some ways has been an end game goal of mine is just like to even get into those rooms, which I'm learning now is a whole other ball game of erasing yourself and twisting yourself into being some sort of thing in the eyes of the white cis heteropatriarchy, making yourself more legible and making yourself like easy to understand.
Like Off the Boat, is that the one?
Fresh Off the Boat. Oh, there's nobody who looks like me in Fresh Off the Boat. They have to go like 5 generations out before you get to this. But and so I'm trying. That I would say is the lesson that I have learned, and I'm trying, and I would. This also, I think, is under a call of action. I'm trying to I would like to make more work that is actually from me, that's for people who are more like me in this or that sort of way, because I think that actually that is probably more important than trying to like, you know, have like a non-speaking role on Gotham as like a punk girl or like some dumb thing that like it technically is a better credit but like doesn't actually do anything for anybody and like doesn't even really do that much for me. And so that's what I've been thinking about as we start the year.
I think listening is what's so important. And we don't do enough of it, you know, we don't listen to each other. And I think that some of the 2017 was hard, because, you know, I didn't listen at times. And then all of a sudden I say, why didn't I listen to that? You know, and it's a couple of months down the line and I start to understand something. And in my age, I think that it's important to listen to your ages now, right? And my age a lot of times doesn't do that. And I think it's really important to do that, to really listen and listen to what they're saying, even if you're, you know, you don't understand social media and you think it's for the birds or whatever, you know, like what's hashtag? Looks like, you know, hashtag is just a number sign, right? So if it's a number sign, why is it called hashtag? Forget about that. Go on. But that's part of the thing that I think about a lot, is that we're not listening, and that's really important. Especially if we want to go into these next centuries and really hear each other. We have to hear it down the years. We have to hear it echoing down the years. That's what's important.
We actually have a question from the Facebook Live viewers, if that's okay. Maybe as
Oh my God, remember that is real.
What'd she say?
So there are people watching on their side of the camera.
Yeah.
On their computers, and they have questions.
Hashtag like.
The question is, what positive things can you say about small independent Chinatown landlords? I think this question is specific. From the point of view of tenant advocates and anti-gentrification advocates, what positive things can you say about small independent Chinatown landlords? It's a very specific question.
I feel like this is for me.
It's yours.
Well, I think.
I think Muriel should answer.
So I want to preface this by saying that I'm not from Chinatown. So there is like a lot of history and community and legacy in this particular place that I think really should be honored, and I don't know if I'm always the best person to speak on it, but Chinatown and the Lower East Side in general have a long history of like building ownership by what I usually categorize as like small ethnic landlords, meaning like families or folks who owned 1 or 2 buildings and were from the same ethnic group as folks in the neighborhood, right? And who yeah, I don't know, and who own buildings for the reasons that people generally own buildings. And I think, you know, just as there are all types of bad landlords, right? What I've seen is that there are large companies, faceless companies coming into Chinatown who have no connection to this community, who systematically harass people and neglect buildings and so forth. And there are also small landlords who have been here for a long time and systematically harass people and neglect things. And those things are both very, very bad in very, very different ways, but also in deeply similar ways. But I think kind of the particular immigrant community and the history here, both, and I'm speaking about Chinatown and in the Lower East Side in general, I think has been fostered by a lot of small businesses and local ownership, right? And I think that's again a tradition that's like very present in this store, and one that has a long history, and it has ties to also racial discrimination in the housing market, and I think is important for the preservation of this community, right? So.
I know that was a hard question.
Thank you, Facebook Live world. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, our panelists. Before we wrap up, I really want to thank May and her family and the store and the landlord. And then before we all put our backpacks on, we have a really quick announcement from Rocky.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm Rocky Chin, but I'm a fan of WOW and the store. And really want to thank all the panelists and May and her family, you know, for giving us a space. Crowded as it is, it's great. It's crowded. I just wanted to invite people to come to the first New York City commemoration celebration of Fay Bonas Day. If you haven't seen this, this is starting to circulate kind of late, but I have a flyer. It's going to be January 30th. It's an opportunity for the community to stand up here, please, to learn about Fred Korematsu, who was a individual who stood up in World War II when there was an executive order like we have now, a travel ban. Well, he was in his 20s, and he stood up to say this was wrong, and he stood up pretty much alone in many ways. I mean, there were some people and some groups, but we have to think. So I'm not going to go on, but I think we need to kind of rediscover who he was and what he stood for. So I really invite you to come. It's going to be at NYU on January 30th at 7 o'clock, the Cantor Film Center. And I have a flyer here I can leave with folks. There is also going to be a press conference, because this is a city council resolution that passed in the end of last session. So the press conference is open to folks and to organizations. It's going to be at 1 o'clock on City Hall steps. So I was very much interested actually in, what was your first name?
Jes.
Jes. I'm curious who you're referring to, because I'm the older generation, and many of us do have, so I was really listening to what you were saying, but I enjoyed the entire panel. I'm glad it was intergenerational, actually. So anyway, thank you very much, and I hope you'll continue to have these kind of programs.
Yeah, thank you, Rocky. Maybe, Rocky, can we leave your flyer here and people who can take a picture so they know how the information? Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. Hope you get home warm. Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. And also check out Emily's paper cuts and pins if you want to support.
Yeah.
Yeah.